South Africans choosing to work and live in another country may be surprised to discover that they are no longer South African citizens once they acquire the citizenship of their adoptive country. South African immigration law expert Stephanie Desada is going to tell us this morning why this is unconstitutional. Stephanie, thank you very much for joining us today. And yes, this is something that has made the headlines over the last few years. But specifically between 2011 and 2015, I believe 2,000 odd South Africans lost their South African citizenship.
That's right.
Tell us exactly how this is happening.
Okay, thank you for having me, Nick. Since 1949, actually, the Citizenship Act provided that South Africans who acquired a foreign nationality by some formal and voluntary act other than marriage whilst being a major, without the minister's written consent, ceases to be a South African citizen. So this has been the case since 1949. The 1949 Act has been replaced a number of times, and very recently there's been an amendment in 2010. That specific section, however, hasn't been changed, hasn't been amended, it's still the same. I think the reason why people are there's so much awareness about this, around this issue now, is simply because Home Affairs, they've become more strict in terms of immigration and citizenship, and they're enforcing these rules now and they never did this before. So basically, if a South African citizen leaves South Africa to go and work and live in another country, and or not even to live and work in another country, applies for citizenship in any other country by any or through a basis other than marriage or other than an inherent right, and that person's a major, that person stands to lose their South African status if they don't get the minister's written consent.
What do you mean when you say a major?
Older than 18.
Okay. So if a South African is granted dual citizenship, this is not something then that can be retracted. I mean, is it only, if this is not being enforced all the time, I guess for South Africans out there who are concerned, who already have two passports, one cannot now be taken away, can it?
Well, it can, depending on the basis on which the other one was acquired. So for example, and again, as I said, it's been the case since 1949, and ignorance of the law, unfortunately, isn't an excuse. So if somebody acquired a passport many years ago by naturalization, so for example, they've lived in a country for a certain number of years.
So it doesn't affect people who have acquired it through birthright?
Well, it depends. So for example, in Namibia, you have a right to citizenship by birth. That's just based on your birth. In that case, you may be excluded because all you're doing when you acquire that nationality is really including your birth or into the registry of the Namibian population. You're not making a formal application for citizenship. But if you acquired, let's say you went to the United Kingdom, lived and worked there, and after X amount of years, I think it's 5 or in some cases 10, you apply for citizenship and it's granted, and you didn't get the minister's prior consent, in that case you will lose it. And depending on when you acquired, you can either apply to the minister to resume your South African citizenship or to be exempted from the loss provision.
Okay.
So you will still lose it. But if it's by descent, for example, a late registration of your birth, it doesn't qualify as a formal and voluntary act, you're excused.
Obviously, you guys have been making noises about the unconstitutional element to all of this. Would you like to explain that?
Well, it's been highlighted recently simply because of the high number or the high volume of calls we've received. Our business is principally South African immigration, but over the last 10 months, I would say, I've had a large number of calls and meetings with South Africans who have now discovered they've lost their South African citizenship. And again, I think with the new amendments, Home Affairs is enforcing this more now than they ever did before. So it's been a topic of discussion in our firm and with our clients over a number of months, but it hasn't been challenged in court yet, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so you don't have any examples of people who've lost their South African citizenship and then have legally regained it, though?
Yeah. Well, yes, again, it's either most South Africans apply for a resumption. So they've discovered they've lost their South African citizenship.
Successful?
Yes, but it takes a long time to get an outcome from the Department of Home Affairs.
And
also,
money, I'm sure, too.
Well, not really. It's not a costly application in terms of the Department of Home Affairs, but it's very time consuming. And also, rules aren't properly enforced, as we've discovered, which is why it's only being enforced now. So when you apply, you often sent away by the officials because they're requesting documents that's not regulated. They want it's as if a compliant application is difficult to file because depending on who's at the desk at the time you file the application, the requirements vary. And if you don't give them what they want, there may be a refusal, and it may be an unlawful refusal, but then it's more time wasted in appealing and awaiting the outcome of the appeal. So it's a time-consuming issue.